Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today, as before, since we've talked about some pretty big and pretty complex topics, I'd like to go ahead and take a couple of videos to show what those topics look like on actual math tests. Okay, so for this video, we will be focusing on multiplying and dividing fractions, and in the next video, we'll talk about adding and subtracting. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Now, as usual, when dealing with a worksheet, my first recommendation is always to skim the whole worksheet and see, are there any problems that I can do very quickly? It doesn't look like it. So I guess we're just going to go from beginning to end here. Now, as before, there's a link to the worksheet along with its answer key in the description to this video. So if you'd like to follow along, or even better, if you'd like to give these problems a try on your own first and then come back to the video, that resource is there for you. So let's take a look at number 1. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry. Not sure what's going on there. So negative 5 over 4 times 1 over 3. Now, one very common question that I get when it comes to negatives is, does the negative go on top or does it go on the bottom? Or does it go in the middle here? And the answer is it can go in any of those places so long as it's only in one, right? Negative 5 divided by 4 is the same thing as 5 divided by negative 4. Either way, a negative divided by a positive is negative. A positive divided by a negative is negative. These are the same value, so it doesn't matter where you put the negative, but you cannot put the negative on both. Because, as we said a few videos ago, a negative times a negative equals a positive, and division is really just multiplication of reciprocals, right? So this negative divided by negative is still positive 1. So putting the negative on the bottom is correct. Putting the negative on top is correct. Putting the negative in front of the whole fraction is correct. All three of these are correct. All right, let's move on. So, as we've said before, when multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across the top, and we get 5 times 1 equals 5. Multiply straight across the bottom. 4 times 3 is 12. And because we have a negative times a positive, the answer is negative. Negative 5 over 12. Normally at this point we would look for any numbers that we can divide both the top and bottom by in order to get a more simplified fraction, but in this case we are already in the simplest form, so we're going to move on to the next problem. 8 over 7 times 7 over 10. So one totally valid way of doing this would be to multiply straight across the top and get 56 on the top, and multiply straight across the bottom and get 70 on the bottom, right? 8 times 7 is 56, 7 times 10 is 70, and then we can whittle away at this fraction in an attempt to make it more simple. But that feels like a lot of work to me. I don't like all the work that it's going to take to simplify this fraction. So instead, what I'm going to do is, again, take advantage of the fact that I can do this multiplication and this division in whatever order I want. I notice, for example, that there is a 7 on the top of this fraction, and there's a 7 on the bottom of this other fraction. The fact that they are in two separate fractions doesn't matter because the two fractions are being multiplied. This 7 is a multiply, and this 7 on the bottom is a divide. We're multiplying by 7 up top. We're dividing by 7 on the bottom. What is 7 divided by 7? Well, it's 1. So now, instead of 56 over 70, we multiply straight across the top and get 8. We multiply straight across the bottom and we get 10. That is much easier to simplify. I can see that 8 is 2 times 4. I can see that 10 is 2 times 5. I know that 2 divided by 2 is 1. So my answer is 4 over 5. Now, clever students will notice that you could have done this part right here, this dividing by 2. You could have done that way back in the first step. I could have noticed that, hey, 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. And that is another valid way of doing this. Number 3. 4 over 9 times 7 over 4. Well, once again, there's a 4 on the top, there's a 4 on the bottom. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So with that out of the way, we multiply straight across the top. 1 times 7 is 7. We multiply straight across the bottom. 9 times 1 is 9. Our answer is 7 over 9. We're picking up steam here. Number 4. Negative 2/3 times 5/4. Well, let's see how quickly we can do this one. Do we see anything here that we can divide right away? Well, I do notice that there is a 2 on the top and a 4 on the bottom. Both of those are divisible by 2, so I can divide this by 2 and get 1, and I can divide this 4 by 2 and get 2. And again, this should make sense because 2 over 4, right, here is our 2 over 4, is the same thing as 1/2. Here's our 1/2. So really what I'm doing here is I'm reducing my fraction first before I start my multiplication. You are allowed to do this in either order you want. If you are more comfortable multiplying first and then reducing, that's totally fine. I prefer to do my reducing early on when I can actually see the relationships more easily. So let's see. We have a negative times a positive, so we get a negative. The top of the fraction is 1 times 5 is 5. And the bottom of the fraction is 3 times 2 is 6. Our answer for number 4 is negative 5 over 6. All right, number 5. Negative 2 times 3 over 7. This is, again, an excellent time to remind everybody that the number negative 2 is not just an integer. It's not just a whole number. It's also a fraction. And actually, this one ends up being pretty straightforward. Straight across the top, negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Across the bottom, 1 times 7 is 7. The answer is negative 6 over 7. These are going pretty quick. Oh, I hate mixed numbers so much. Okay, we have 4 more problems to go, and these are all division. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 13. Negative 3 over 2 divided by negative 10 over 7. Now, as a review, divide means multiply by the reciprocal. And then once you do that, it becomes a problem just like we've been doing. So instead of dividing by negative 10 over 7, I'm going to take the same negative 3 over 2, but I'm going to multiply it by the reciprocal of that divisor, 7 over negative 10. Let's see. I've got a negative on top, a negative on the bottom. Negative 1 divided by negative 1 is just 1, so I can essentially cancel out those negatives. I don't really see anything else that I can divide out. So I multiply straight across the top. 3 times 7 is 21. I multiply straight across the bottom. 2 times 10 is 20. Our final answer for number 13 is 21 over 20. So as you can see, these division problems really aren't any more complicated than the multiplication problems. You just have to make sure you are flipping over the right fraction. You want to flip over the one that is doing the dividing, right? This negative 3 over 2 is being divided. This negative 10 over 7 is the one doing the dividing. That's the one that you flip. Okay, so let's look at number 14. 1/2 divided by 8 over 7. So once again, we're going to take our 8 over 7 and we're going to flip it. So we get 1/2 times 7 over 8. Straight across the top, straight across the bottom, we get 7 over 16. No problem. I think we only have 2 more. Negative 9 over 5 divided by 2. By this point, we are all experts. We all know that 2 is actually 2 over 1. So what we're really doing is negative 9 over 5 times 1 over 2. Negative 9 times 1 is negative 9. 5 times 2 is 10. Our answer is negative 9/10. As always, questions can be left in the comments, and I will do my best to answer as many of them as possible. Next video, we're going to talk about adding and subtracting fractions, and we're going to talk a little bit about a few shortcuts on how to find common denominators without having to go through all the steps that you probably had to go through when you were in middle school. Until then, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.